this is super cool. If I'm being really honest, Brian and I had no idea so many of you guys would be interested in coming back, which is just like really fun in itself. And so we just wanted to start by saying thank you. But we have some really fun questions we're going to get to. One of the things that Brian and I were most curious about is what's been going on since October. So we recorded this back almost 9 months ago when AI wasn't even a thing, which we'll touch on that, I'm sure, at some point. But what's fun is anyone kind of have some like fun updates from October, maybe just with conversations that came after your episode, or any people that have like reached out from the conversations that you guys have had. Special shout out for you, Chara, when we get to some stuff about you. But Chara went viral on Instagram. We have no idea how or why, but his little
I
quote.
don't have Instagram, so
It's awesome.
so that's news to me. Although I did get some feedback from my company asking, "What were you talking about?" So
Yeah, well, that's even better. But any fun stories that you guys would want to share from conversations that you've had or the clips that, got posted or shared? One would just love to kind of start kind of with that.
I was just gonna say, like, since recording, back in October, like, it's kind of a similar story to the one you're just telling. But like, I've had a handful of people just randomly reached out to me on LinkedIn. It's like, oh, I heard you on this podcast, and then like I actually went back and forth messaging with some of these people, and like there was one guy in particular, like he just had like my exact same story pretty much, and I was like, we're pretty much the same person here, just working at different companies, like on the other side of the country or whatever. And it's just like cool to hear that experience and like that people are going through the same things or like have the exact same background or even just similar experiences from completely different backgrounds. But it's similar to the story you were just telling with that guy in Canada. Yeah, it's really cool to hear that people are listening and going through the same experiences that you are.
Yeah, so true. Cutler, what do you got?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that was my fault, but I work with a celebrity in his own right, Hamza. So I haven't had that experience yet of someone coming up to me. I mean, I've maybe got a couple of notes on LinkedIn, which is good, but I guess that's I gotta go solo because if not, my guy takes the limelight. So
I don't know. Your guys' episode was so fun. One, because I think what was interesting is the week before we released your guys' episode, someone had reached out asking about other companies that were, kind of on the venture side of it. And I was like, hey, wait till you get to hear some of this stuff. And I ended up sending it to them. And they're like, man, this is exactly the questions that I was curious to know about. And like, I kind of always thought this was like under the table stuff that people didn't talk. Anyway, it was just like a really well-timed thing. And it was just awesome to be able to kind of share what you guys had talked about on the episode.
Well, I mean, so a conversation that's been coming up recently has been like, even since that podcast, the amount of different job titles that have been created. So obviously, like I've been seeing like operational excellence become more of a standard at companies. I mean, you have these new type of job titles, and I'm curious here too. Like everybody here has kind of like helped pave the way at their company for like what your job like description is. Like I think Anthony, when I first met you, my job description was innovation manager, and I pretty much napkin sketched that between me, Todd McCabe, and Jack Morin of like that was my title when I joined the company. And obviously these roles are becoming more defined over time. Like, has anybody seen some newer titles or any predictions on kind of like the next couple, even the next year of like how they see their internal structure changing?
I think anything I've learned over this time period is that with how quickly things are moving, and I'm done making predictions about anything, to be honest with you. So I'm kind of just like, I'm going to fly by the seat of my pants at this point. But no, I think it's good though. And I mean, honestly, we did the same thing, right? It was like, when we were trying to stand up Disrupt Tech, it was like, all right, well, what should your title be? Like, I don't know, like, then we like asked around a little bit. And so you're starting to see again, like some kind of more unique titles that hopefully become more standard, right? Because that means, people are really starting to push the bounds, when you see more and more people with innovation, because it's that way in other industries, right? So it's nice seeing that really penetrate the, engineering construction world.
Nicole, I'm curious to know, I mean, you from the consulting side, you probably get to interact with a whole host of different titles. Are there ones that stand out that you've even kind of seen, even, I mean, 9 months ago was a long time, but even like from our conversation, like which ones have stood out maybe that have been more common or ones that are just like, whoa, that's like crazy unique?
Yeah, I think like the construction technologist, obviously, and the operations excellence like crew have been the ones that have been really predominant amongst the folks that I'm working with. And I kind of love the fact that that kind of lends itself to actually kind of saying we are here to make things better. And that's how a couple of CFOs and CEOs have kind of pitched it to me or pitched it back to me when we were trying to define these roles in-house. So I definitely see that that's kind of where the industry is going within the titling. But I think that that's also pretty vague in some regards, because I think that it's not as like cut and dry. Like the obviously, head of innovation, that's big. But again, what does that encompass? Does that encompass your BIM? Does that encompass your scanning? Like all of the different operations, who's actually doing all of the data mapping and all of that, because it's so complex. But typically, I'm seeing those two
Totally.
as the prominent ones.
Kara, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. One, how often does your role get now kind of, or your title maybe get mixed up with Chief Innovation Officer versus Chief Information Officer? I'm curious to know that, but two, I'll let you kind of speak to that point too.
Yeah, I think so. The tough things around the titles is, what is, are you a CTO, CSO, CSO, all those different things, because depending on the size of your company, depending on the hats you have to handle, and most people handle a lot of different hats, especially in our industry where we, invest in all these things and want to be innovative and will be innovative, but we also have to be on budget, on time, and be cognizant or respectful of the client and what they need and their wants for all the stuff that we're doing. So overall, for the titles for us, or what we try to do, is the title hopefully will empower the person that has it, giving them the stature that's needed, but also the ability to talk to vendors, to be able to take the time to do that. When you are an APM and you're the innovation person, you're really being an APM. You're not really, you're really focused, it's secondary to you. And what I'm hopeful with all these titles is that this can then be your first thing, right? Your first thing can be the emerging technologies or innovation or those things that someone, for me, who has in a leadership role, having to have those, I want them to be there, not half in, half out. And then if a job gets busy, all of you who've worked on jobs know that stuff happens and all of a sudden that takes precedence. So the fact that the industry is seeing the need to let people focus on those things and it's worth something to us and it's valuable, that's really the hope. And I think that's where, even though the titles are all kind of getting moved around, the fact that we're recognizing that this is a need, operational excellence, innovation, emerging technology, all that stuff, just like for those of you on the call that are VDC and your role didn't exist. You kind of built it yourself. Probably you came into it, you created it, you showed your value. So the work that was done there, I think, is paying off to see these better, or at least more front facing and focused.
I think a word you said that like totally resonates to not only I think us as individuals, but the listeners too that we've heard from, is like having a role that makes them feel empowered. Like I love what you said about, hey, this reality of you're reaching out to someone and they're an APM, like that isn't their normal like day-to-day stuff. And just as some of the listeners that have reached out and asked us about, guests and who's on and topics and things like that, like it's really something that they're wanting to ask and know more about, is like, hey, like if I do have an opportunity to, come up with the title that makes sense for me, I love what you said just about like, make sure it can empower you as the person that, is fulfilling that role. Jesse, what thoughts you got?
Talking about titles, one of the things that's always kind of I'm trying to find the best way to elevator pitch the difference between innovations and emerging technology for us, because we've got an innovations group and I'm not in that. That's specifically out of technology. It's underneath our self-perform group. And then I'm emerging technology inside of our technology group. So I was wondering how many groups out there, how many companies out there do have a distinction between those two? Do you have innovations and also more, I think I'm more near term, like the rough sketch is like 5 to 10 years in robots is innovation, 6 to 12 months in off-the-shelf technology is emerging tech, looking for problem statements and answering them. So does anybody else in your teams, do you guys differentiate between those two like that?
Yes. Yeah. The focus for us, or at least the thought, is innovation isn't just technology. It's process. It can be almost anything. And we do need someone to focus on technology and focus on, like you said, the emerging technologies, because that's a different thing. It may not even be something solely innovative about it, but that's where the world's going. And we got to, even though it's not that different, it's something new, right? And then beyond that, making it innovative. So you can't, our goal is always, our focus with innovations has always been, it's not just about technology. It's
right,
and we shouldn't keep the blinders on when it comes to that.
Yeah, and I keep process under my my umbrella as well. So when someone comes with a problem statement, the answer to that problem might be an existing tool that we already have. They just didn't know about it. It might be modifying that tool. Hey, CMIC can also do this, or it could be a process change. We might look at that as a process change, or it might be okay. Let's go test out some different facilities management tools, things like that. So I try not to stay blind to process stuff as well.
Yeah, and I think that was a really common theme. What's funny, Brian and I sat in this role of like hearing all of your guys' conversations and being like, holy cow, these are like such commonalities from each of these conversations. And one of those is specifically what you're saying, Jesse, is like, it's not just about the technology. And of course, like we know that, but I think for folks that are like tuning in and listening, it's like, hey, broaden that out. Like, is it a process? Is that something that needs to be like mapped out differently than just technology? Because unfortunately, and we talked about this in a lot of episodes too, is like, hey, there's a tech responsibility to this as well, of like not just coming at it with like, hey, this is the new tool, this is what you should use, like go and do this. And so anyway, it's interesting to hear you guys hit on that again, because that was such a common theme, not only just in our individual conversations, but as you like really progress through the second half of the season too.
And even before that, John, you had something?
Yeah, John, go for it.
I was just going to talk about titles and how it's kind of actually helped us by putting a title in that's specific to technology. Before, salespeople would go and get every single project manager because they couldn't go and look at LinkedIn and find that person to go point of contact. And so they just shotgun blasted the entire company and just hoping that someone returned an email that they would somehow get to the right person. So, if you don't have that in your company, it doesn't need to be something, like innovation, emerging technologies, like those get a little scary, I think, to some of the smaller guys out there. Like, you got to remember that we're not all ENR top 100 or ENR top 200. So like some of these companies, they just need someone who's just, hey, the technology guy, right? No one likes to be called like the tech guy, or IT is my least favorite if someone calls me IT. But, I'm director of technology is my role. And that's just, it knows that other people outside of Andrus know that, okay, hey, go to John to get in with technology to Andrus. And it basically opens a door for your company rather than having everyone be that door.
Yeah, well said. Ben, go for it here.
I was going to say something else before, but now I want to tag along to what John was saying. So like, that's what my role is supposed to be too. I'm supposed to be that initial filter, salespeople of new tech, new software, whatever is supposed to like come to me first. And that's how it ideally should work. But you're talking about blasting just to every PM at our company. That will still happen even after I turn them down or something.
That's the bad part.
Demo, I'll do a trial or something. And then like a few weeks later, I get an email from one of our PMs or something. It's like, hey, have you seen this before? And I'm like, yeah, I did a demo with those guys 2 weeks ago. And I said, no, we weren't interested because it doesn't fit in our workflow.
Yeah. We almost need to do a podcast on teaching tech salespeople how we work on our side, because I think a lot of people are just like, I need to send out emails. I need to cold call people. I need to set more meetings. And it's like, no, do this in a systematic way that, that we're not going to all be like, I can't stand that person who keeps reaching out to me. You know who you are if you're watching this.
The ones who need to hear it would not be the ones listening to us.
I did.
Yeah, they're probably not listening. Actually, you're right.
Yeah. I did actually do that once, John. I'm pretty sure it was with Procore, actually. It was while I was trying out some new feature of Procore. I can't remember what it was, but I ended up getting on a call with and there were like 10 people or something from Procore. And it was their like salespeople. And they're like, hey, for someone who gets pitched to all the time, like, what can we do differently and stuff? That was a really refreshing call, actually. It was really nice to be able to provide that.
I think you just came up, John, with the season 4 theme and topic. Brian and I are just dying over here with smiles and laughs from what we hear on this side of life. But Chara, what do you got?
Well, to tag on to that, you'd have to start in college, because the people you would have trained may move on, and then the new people calling you are the first level people at that company again. So
Yeah.
the turnover factor in those things. So no matter what you set for that person or that team, they change a little bit. But I think, you know, to speak of innovation and speak on the different rules that people kind of fostered, and to your point with the titles, it's the strength and the power to say no to technology that you're not ready for as a company, you're not ready for as a group. It could be great and innovative, and you may feel like you're getting passed by that thing, and you can waste time, money, and effort because you aren't ready culturally, you're not ready to implement. And that's where I think being able to focus in and having that empowered role to be able to say no, right? To be able to not waste your time testing something because you guys aren't ready for it. Or you know, it doesn't matter that it's, you know, you're still going to build those buildings. You're still going to win those contracts. You're still going to do because your company's going to do that, has done it without those things already, you know, but I think that's especially with the younger people coming up or the people moving into these roles, that ability to be like, this isn't right for us. Even though you got some senior person saying, we need to use this because it's got a pretty this or this and that. We got to, and you are the expert and have to have the strength to say, this is not right for us right now. Our data isn't in the right place. We don't have the right training, all that kind of stuff.
Man, so well said. I don't know if we talk about enough, like the power of no. And that's such a like helpful yet like very applicable thing to kind of share, not only with no matter where you're at, you know, in kind of your tenure within the industry. But yeah, great point. Cutler, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, just to add a little bit on there too, like, yeah, I mean, that's actually tends to be sort of a challenge for us at times too, because, you know, we obviously want to enable our folks to, you know, think outside the box and be exploring solutions, right? But more often than not, when I find out that, you know, we do some vetting, even a pilot in some cases, and we give pretty structured feedback to the company, and it's like, hey, this doesn't really work for us, or, you know, here's what we really need that you guys can't quite deliver yet. Let's kind of table it and revisit later on. It's in one ear out the other, and the next thing I know, you know, I've got, you know, some APMs or somebody else in the company coming out, and again, it's like positive because it's like, that's great. Like, I want to encourage that, but it's hard sometimes to capture that, and a lot of times it'll get kind of pretty far down the road by the time it bubbles up, you know, from one channel or another, right, in the company. And it's like, haven't found a good way to kind of stage gate some of that stuff yet. And again, not saying, you know, we need to be the gatekeeper for all things technology, right? But it helps, especially with some of these startups that are just out selling, right, and selling a lot of things that they actually can't deliver on, you know, to be like, that's what we're here for, is the vet. So you guys, you know, so our teams don't have to spend the time doing that. But unfortunately, they'll get had from every now and then. But it's definitely something that, you know, we struggle with for sure, is like stage getting that. And I was going to say, just on top of that, there was an interesting survey that came out back to the titles piece about it was AXA and I think Building Ventures. And it's kind of dated at this point, but it was pretty interesting correlation between who has like tech and innovation titles. And again, it's a couple of years dated, but out of the top ENR 400, it was like, you know, folks with the team, with a tech team or titles of innovation, emerging technology. From the ENR top 400 was between 3 to 6. And then obviously, you know, it's like sliding scale. So the closer to the top you are, ENR top 100, they're more likely to have more. And then as you kind of go down, it's like slims a bit. But there was an interesting correlation of pretty, I wouldn't say meaningful number, but of like whether those titles were in companies that were experiencing growth or not. And they were correlated positively. So ideally, it's like if you did have, you know, if you did have folks on your team with technology and innovation roles, they tended to be in those higher performing categories as far as a company. So again, I'm probably have people tooth and nail, you know, want to come at me for that in one way or another, but I thought that was an interesting piece. So
what was that? What was that reference? Sorry, you mentioned the name.
So it was so AXA did a survey, I believe, with Building Ventures, and this was late, it's probably early 2021 now. So it's a couple years dated. It feels like it was yesterday, right? But yeah, that was kind of the interesting correlation. So I'll dig some of that stuff up and I'll send it to you guys so you can reference it or link it or whatever.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it in your episode. Actually, I remember you guys talking about
mentioned.
it.
Yeah, he had some reference. I was wondering if that was the same one.
John, go for it.
So kind of jump back into the power of no.
Come on.
Yeah, say no to Google Glasses, right? Back
Only Apple VR.
yes.
No, so I was going to kind of add something I've gotten from the tech companies that we've worked with. So they're always like, well, that's not on our roadmap, right? It's such a great kind of slide to the side. Like, hey, whatever you're trying to sell me, like I've got a roadmap of things that I want to implement at the company. And like someone was saying, we're not ready for that yet. We might not be ready for a piece of tech right now, but we're planning for that. And so I've got to fit you into my roadmap. And like, you're not going to do laser scanning before you start a VDC, like BIM department, right? Like that's something that's got to be, one thing's got to go before the other, right? And so I think reality capture is like the entry level, like the document stuff like Procore, and then getting into reality capture is like that second, right? From there, like you can kind of decide where your road leads you. But I was curious if anybody else has like a roadmap or like a plan of attack for what thing that they're reviewing at a time, and like which direction they want to go with tech at their company.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'll jump on that. That's the combination of the roadmap and the power of no thing is, a lot of the times the answer I gave is, this is like a great tool, but I'm not getting asked to solve that problem right now. So it's not even necessarily we have a roadmap of every technology, but especially in my group where everything is based around getting problem statements from our operations group. And people haven't given me a problem statement. I might think it's really cool, but I obviously don't have that ask at that point. Now, the answer might be people that have some cool solutions to things might get out and demo to some jobs. Maybe I should set up some jobs that are forward thinking that want to look at stuff. That job then identifies, hey, I do have a problem here and I would like to get it solved. And so then that becomes the ask for us. But also I'm noticing some tools, especially the ones that are like, hey, we're a platform. We do 1,800 things. It's so cool. Yes, they might solve like 4 or 5 little problem things that are out there, but they could be things that people just see, oh, that's just the way it is in construction. It's just always going to be that way. I'm not even going to bother submitting a problem because how are we ever going to solve that? Well, you add 4 or 5 of those together, that might actually become a big, hairy enough problem that it is worth having a platform that solves that. So it looks like that stirred on some other comments there.
I need a hot take button over here because the hot take question I want to ask is like, what are the things that you guys are being sold right now that aren't problem statements? Like, what are some of those things that you guys are seeing that don't necessarily fit into the problem statements that you're trying to solve?
Do you want us to get hate mail?
I mean, I said hot take.
Specifically call out software.
Well,
I think you have to call out their name, but I'm just saying, like, hey, if you want to, that's your
some of them though might be feature specific where you could really figure out.
Yeah, I can't even drop the feature specific thing because it's gonna basically be like, oh, that's one person.
Okay, we'll categorize it.
Well, let's say we're on the call with Drone Deploy. I still don't need cut fill of soil on my job because I'm not the civil guy. It's neat.
There,
it's cool
Jessica is taking shots at us. So that worked.
Hey, everyone's open. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I don't need it. My civil guy needs that. That's his risk, not my risk. And sorry, Char, you had your hand up too.
Oh yeah, Char, you're talking roadmap.
Well, I think it leads right into this. I think the art of this for us and for me over the years has been paying attention to what's coming, having a flexible roadmap that can be agile as things come. But yes, understanding what no one's asking me for right now, and maybe that's not right for me to take on because time, effort, money, and need. But there are things that no one's asked me for, but I need to change. I need to, because if I don't start trying to change it now, we're not going to be ready when it hits us. And that's, and I've been doing this for a while at 2 different large companies. So the focus on what's coming and picking the right tool that we think will be there with us, even though I'm going to only use part of it now, or only going to introduce it into my world now. I'm really focused when we do implementations in roll stuff out is to try to focus on making sure the base is there, and then we build on that base and not just go for the scope creep that happens. And that scope creep that happens many times is that one little thing that someone thinks they need, but the 99 other things we solve, they ignore because that one thing's not there. Well, let's try to eliminate that and focus on the good, right? And sometimes the good isn't shiny, isn't seen as innovative, but it's giving you the nice base for you to get to the shiny and the new. Data is a huge thing. If your data isn't right, Power BI, what other data you have is never going to work. If you don't enter the change order in the right way, you don't cost it right, you're never going to get good reports. So
Charles going 2 for 2 here with his viral quote.
Right.
I mean, I think when you
it's
said
stuck
that,
in my head.
I think what you said that stood out is I've never heard of scope creep applied to a tech company, because that is so true, right? It's like we get led down this path that's
Scope
like
creep happens in almost every meet. Someone comes to me, hey, I want to do this. We do it. We come back. Well, I want to do that. I'm like, no, let's do this. And then we'll add that later, but every meeting, unless you're clear and you're defined and what you go, and for me, scope creep happens in the conversation. I'm envisioning something that I think you're saying, you're envisioning something completely different, right? Because we think differently. They're on a construction job all day. They think that's up. I'm more of on the tech side. So I'm looking at it through my lens. They're looking at it through their lens. So the scope creep happens without us even knowing it, because they didn't realize that what I was saying wasn't going to manifest in the same fashion.
Yeah, well said. Lots of great follow-up thoughts to that. Ben, go for it.
I'm trying to remember what I was going to say now. It was something more related to the beginning of what Char was just talking about like recognizing that your company does need this new software technology solution or whatever. Your company, I think I was going to say something along the lines of like, even if you recognize you need it, you also need to know the type of like technology culture you have at your company, because maybe you recognize that you need this new workflow technology, whatever, but like, if you know your project teams well enough, your field teams, whoever, you might realize, okay, these teams aren't ready for this right now. Like, it's not going to fit into their workflow. So like that can be a time to say that you need to say no as well, if you know that they're not going to actually adopt it. So maybe you need to find a different solution that solves a similar problem, but that will work with that team's workflows.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting too, that hopefully a takeaway for the folks tuning in is like, hey, control what you can control. If you have a well-defined like roadmap or just even direction, let's just call it that for simplicity's sake, like that can be incredibly helpful in these conversations, in these phone calls that, you're getting reached out to and you're diving into. Like, it just helps bring a lot of clarity, which is, I think, oftentimes never in abundance in some things that we deal with. And so, yeah, great points to make there. John, any thoughts to that?
I was going to go back to the thing where you wanted us to get hate mail on. And I think I finally figured out what hate mail I want. But
it's John.Andrus at, no, I'm just
yeah, give him that one. No, my thought is the furthest thing on our roadmap right now is probably like really rolling out VR. Like, as from a trade side or like prefab side, maybe VR's got some stuff there, but I think it's got a long way to go. And maybe that's a hot take. But we need the button back from Groundbreak. But I just see it being something harder for me to like implement VR goggles and that whole thing. I think
who is implementing it? Like who's really doing it everywhere? Some large companies, we have large companies that do it on 2 jobs. That doesn't mean that they're doing it throughout the industry, but they can promote it that way and they're gonna sell it that way. But when you dig in, and I think that's the hardest thing for the small companies to medium to large is, what you see sometimes is being done and tested, maybe on a handful of jobs, but isn't pervasive, throughout the industry or company. I remember seeing 4D BIM 20 years ago or whatever it was, and no one was even doing it, right? So, it was like, but some company was presenting on how they were doing 4D BIM.
Yeah, now
it's a marketing campaign. At the end of the day, I feel like sometimes it's just a marketing campaign. If you actually aren't practically getting benefits from it from an operational standpoint, if it's not reducing your risk, if it's not reducing safety incidents or quality failures, I think that it is almost a marketing pitch, unfortunately.
But it adds to that fact of you might not be ready yet, but you can start setting some groundwork for it. You can start getting educated. You can start learning you can start seeing where that opportunity might be for you to jump in on it. So it's the balance between no, but maybe later, or maybe a little, maybe a little, so.
Yeah. Like the iPad. So back in the day, iPad, before it came out, we were putting drawings on it. Just like now you can use a VR headset and you can do something on it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm also going to pay for the SaaS behind it. And, that model is going to work.
Can we just all coin the term Hollywood BIM? I feel like I've heard it said in so many other different phrases and notes. I don't know, hashtag that. And because it's so true. I think what you guys are talking about, again, is helpful for the listeners to hear too, of wait, other people might think that too, that maybe that's just a nice shiny thing and it's not as applicable. But Patrick, I want to go to you, and then Cutler, I see your hand up too, but Patrick, what do you got?
When you print those t-shirts that say Hollywood BIM, I am ready to buy a whole box of them and hand them out to an audience.
You'll be the first I'll send it to. Maybe
my favorite
we'll
wrestler.
Make an Etsy store and see what
Or a
what hits.
hat. Yeah. Well, that wasn't my only comment though. That's funny. I think it's neat that the audience, us right here, right? We such an awesome crowd here, and it seems like we're influential in the different regions that we're in, right? And we have the power to talk with other contractors that don't have the capabilities that all of us have, right? Especially a lot of trade partners. Someone mentioned the E&R top, whatever, earlier, but I think the majority of contractors on job sites probably just don't understand how to get into any of this stuff, even if it's as simple as opening a 3D model, right? And providing value. So we're here and we can ultimately educate them, as a lot of us are GCs and we have access to some of these tools, but there are tools that we don't need, right? We've talked about that quite a lot, because trade partners might need tools in the tech world that might not even make sense for a general contractor at all, right? Like the VR discussion and prefab layout tools, right? If we're not self-performing, right? But we're always there. We can help educate on that. And then going back to the other point of, I'm curious of what are the roadblocks or barriers are out there for us and other contractors? And what comes to my mind too is, are there designers out there that are generally pushing back? Designers or even owners, are they pushing back against some of this tech? Are they scared of it? Right? Is there cost, big cost speed bumps in the way, slowing people down? And I know, at least from my perspective, I think those conversations have been had, right? Design teams generally, maybe they are scared of what's coming. If we ever want to dive into AI, right? Or even generative design in those regards. So I'm kind of all over the place, but I've been in the background just listening, and all these thoughts flying through my head. I'm just kind of,
I knew that was a loaded gun there, Patrick. So that's why I was like, all right, release Patrick here.
I lost the internet. I got to go.
Design questions are actually on our
Whoops, lost that. Yeah.
The design questions are actually on our sister podcast, Design Different. But it's a good point. The architectures, that's an absolute joke. Sorry, guys.
I was about to say, I've never
really
heard
lame.
I
I was weird enough that I went too far. Anyway, no, it's a good point, and I think that's what has been really fun about this is, like, Brian and I had no idea what conversations we were going to have at Procore, and you guys came along, and the conversations clearly had a theme around it, and it's been really cool to see what's come from it, and yeah, it's great points, Patrick. I love the thoughts there too. Cutler, go for it.
Yeah, just kind of coming full circle with it. So shout out, the cut fill has actually been valuable for us on some non-civil projects. So I'll just replug that.
Take that, Jesse.
And
no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And then also going to the we've had some success with VR from safety training perspective and getting immersive experiences around hazards and hazard awareness that stands out more than watching a video and a photo. However, the challenges are real about deploying this, right? And from, talking from, inside the industry and outside the industry, even like folks like Booz Allen, that's, one of the lead contractors for the government, right? That's training people to do all sorts of types of complex missions. Like, they're utilizing VR, but they've even seen the challenges and how, rollout is challenging. And that's with, the government, that is a separate story, but they've got an unlimited budget at the end of the day, right? So things like that. So there's complexities with it. And then I would just throw into, like, I don't need any more one-stop shop project management tools. Like, just don't need them right now. So focus on the point solutions. That's something that I look for in startups, right? It's just as important when they talk about what they do as what they don't do, right? And they know they know where they start and stop and where they fit into the picture. That is pretty eye-opening for me when I'm having conversations with these companies that are pretty early on in building something. And I'm like, that's good to know, instead of the outside of they start listing off their entire roadmap and they're going to solve all my problems in a very short period of time. So yeah, I'll just leave that one there.
We don't know who from the tech side is listening to this, but we hope there's some folks. I mean, clearly you guys are giving a lot of the playbook and roadmap for some of those conversations, but yeah, it's a good point. Ben, you got anything?
I got to tag on to 2 comments. First, Cutler, you're talking about looking for those point solutions. So yeah, it's look for those point solutions that work with your whole project management system, though. It can't just be a siloed point solution, maybe for certain specific things. But yeah, for the most part, if it's not integrating into the full overall tech stack, then that point solution is worthless to me. So I want to say that. But then going back to what Patrick was talking about, he was asking about like roadblocks of like, owners, are they prohibitive of like using these new techs and stuff? And I just want to say, like, I've seen it across the board. Like, yes, some of them are like, okay, smallest budget possible. We don't want to do any of these extras that, aren't helpful to the project, even though we all know they are. But then like we have some other owners who are like, won't even give a specific example. They're like, hey, what new cool things can we try on this job? They might not say cool. They might say, useful, which it actually is. But you know what I'm trying to say, though? Like they want to try new innovative things on the projects. And, maybe it's just to make the project go more efficient. Maybe it is just a marketing thing for them so that they can say, oh, we're trying this. But it's great to see those owners that actually care about trying new innovative solutions, even if they're not directly like immediately benefiting from it as much as we are as a GC. So yeah, I've seen that across the board, but it's great to see those owners that do actually care.
Need more of that, right?
Yeah. Where are you finding these people?
Oh, they're doing it.
They're not the common, but it definitely helps. It really helps it, right? When you have the flexibility to get creative and to really kind of push the bounds, right?
Yeah, they're not in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Maybe
they vacation there.
I feel like a lot of the times I'm finding that some of the GCs and trade partners I'm working with have had almost roadblocks put in place because the owners want to deploy construction tech in their own right and capture data in their own right. And it's creating issues with not having shared data systems or CDX like in place before projects kick off. So people are doing the same entry on 4 different platforms, or one platform for them, one platform for the GC, one platform for the owner. So I'm hopeful that in the next couple of years, we see much more integrated systems or CDX plugins that allow this data to shift naturally or in a controlled facet, because I think that the owners in their own right want to explore what the benefits are to them for deploying similar technology.
Oof. I think everyone's like lips are sealed because we don't all want to get in trouble for this one.
Hey, we're getting in trouble all day.
I mean, I think it's just we're talking reality, right? And then I guess it depends on the type of technology. Like specifically with us, like we are a documentation tool, and I think a lot of that should live at the contractor level. And I guess it benefits multiple people. I mean, how it gets handed over is another conversation, but
don't sell anything to owners and just sell it to us.
Yeah, and that's why we focus on.
I mean, that's the problem. This has been the same problem. I've been doing this for a long time, and 20 years ago, we felt the same way. If we just had one system that the owner could use, the architect could use, but the architect has their system, we have our system. Even now, there's different tools to take pictures, walk the sites that one client would have, another client won't have. We don't have it, and the world's better now that APIs and integrations are stronger. It's just that, but when you dig in deep, especially for the startups or the newer company, like they may not have the resources to focus on the openness that you need to make it work for you, for that client, for that job, for that world, or you may not have the expertise in house to make it work. So
we talked about that a little bit yesterday, or we talked about it on the first reunion episode a little bit of like, a common question that Brian and I didn't think would garner a whole host of responses, but we asked it in pretty much every episode. It's like, hey, what's the tech's responsibility here? And how can we really help in this initiative of making things less confusing? And someone mentioned purely just API documentation. And gosh, we haven't hit to this topic and we only have a few minutes left, but just how that's been like API documentation for uses with AI and like ChatGPT and like this idea of like how that has become so much easier to do and a lower barrier of entry with the right documentation, which maybe I'm talking about season 5's topic, which who knows where AI is going to be in that sense. But sorry, Jesse, go for it.
So just not going on the AI part of it first, but just companies that say they have a documented API and their understanding of what documented means is maybe not what I understand. Just because you use it internally successfully for many years and then turned it onto public doesn't mean that it's usable. Very recent burn scars on that one, which has been fun.
Maybe there should be a public scoring system for your API and
or just
let
like,
the
what I do is I keep examples of the companies that I think have good documentation. When someone asks, like, I want something as good as this, I just send them that, and so that's one way that I'm able to at least, there, of course, no one wants to admit they haven't done as good a job, but that's an example I can usually give.
Totally.
And then the AI side of it, like integrating in APIs with AI, not necessarily having even touched that yet, leads me to the question, though, that I think a lot of us are seeing out there is people trying to rely on AI to write your code and that kind of stuff, and people mistakenly putting IP and proprietary information into these models, not thinking about the fact that now your IP is part of the model. We've all seen, we've seen like the lawyer stories, like writing bad briefs, but that's not as bad, in my opinion, as like putting your company's IP in there. And making sure you think about wherever you can, like even if you want to like have it do some custom scanning of things inside a BIM model, instead of putting your information or your structure or something into the AI, say, hey, give me a Python plugin I can put into Revit or whatever that uses these classes and this structure and that kind of stuff that can find this for me. Then you check it, make sure it's not saying also send all this information to, China and Russia. But, that's a way to think about, you're separating and never letting the two touch, right? And let the AI write some programming for you. You put it into and look at your system and do your own thing with it.
Man, why did I bring this up, or why did we bring this up at the end of, but what's crazy, guys, I know we're getting to time here, but can we just appreciate the fact that the words or the letters GPT didn't really resonate with any of us when we recorded these episodes? Like that
whole nother episode.
Like that is crazy to think that, and shame on us for taking so long to get them out and editing, but two, like that is crazy. Like if that happened, or how much has happened since, 9 months ago when we were recording these, it's just crazy to think. And I hate to be the time check, one, mainly because I want to respect your guys' time and schedules too. This has been super fun. We are just super humbled that you guys would give up your time to come back. Honestly, we had no idea that many people would be interested and that you guys would be so excited to come back. And so thank you. We hope the folks that are tuning in and listening are also super encouraged to have as many of you around this circle. And if you have a chance to go to some of these conferences here coming up in the fall, that you guys would reach out on LinkedIn, like please do connect and have a chance to meet some of these individuals that we've had on. It's been a true, just humbling experience. And Brian, I just want to kind of give you the last say before we sign off too.
Yeah, the last thing I want to challenge everybody in this room, particularly, is after this, maybe find an episode. I gave the same challenge to the other group: is find an episode of maybe that you wouldn't have originally listened to of somebody else here, and reach out to them and start a conversation. Like, I guess Built Different has become more than just a podcast. It's slowly becoming our community, and I think conversations between each other and then just getting more involved with everybody is going to be. Is really the way forward. And especially with, the biggest thing I realized with Matt is there are a lot more Matts than people in this room who are the technology department at their company. And, if we can just kind of give back and, lessons learned back to others, I think that's really the way we kind of give back and kind of helps that legacy.
Thank y'all so much again. This has been really fun. We hope you guys are even more excited. The stuff that we've been recording for the next season, which will come out really at the early part of July, has been really cool. And again, please, like Brian said, share, listen, give us feedback. So thank y'all for tuning in. Super fun. And we'll catch up with you guys here again soon for the next season.
Make sure to subscribe to Built Different on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Like Brian said,
let's build this community together. Build this community together. Build this community together. Let's build this community.